So, hey everyone, welcome to the course, and today we will be starting with the selectors. Okay, so selectors are the most important topic if you want to create any of the website. Okay, some are the basic selectors and some of the selector we use with the requirements. Okay, whenever we have the requirement, we usually use it. But now think, we have a parent element, okay, and we want to select the children element. The parent element I want to say is, let's suppose this body. I have already created a file and named as it selector. Now this body, the body is going to have a parent, right? This is the parent now. Anything I am going to write inside it, it's going to be its children, okay? So what if I want to select some specific children? So for that I need to use selector. If you remember, in the previous lectures I have used a word called element selector. So what was that? Element selector was whenever you select any of the element and you are applying some CSS to it, it's called a element selector. So the combinators were, like, you can have a multiple selectors at one time, like H1, P1 with the class. Okay, so that was that. So now let's understand what is the difference between class, ID, we'll see universe, selector, and many more. So let's start with it. So first thing I want to tell you about DOM. Okay, just the basic thing I want to explain. So DOM is the document object model. Okay, even you understand that whenever you write the code over here in terms of tag, right? So it is going to be manipulated, or it is going to have a tree-like structure in the backend. Okay, so that it can execute one by one. So always whenever we talk about DOM, just assume that this particular document is going to be converted into something like tree structure. Okay, these tags are going to be inside your tree. Okay, for example, your HTML is going to have a root element which is going to be at the top. This is the top element, okay? Then you will have a title, then you will have a body, or you can have a head, body. So body will contain other divs. So what is happening? That your HTML is the root element, and which is the parent of your head and your body element, right? So if the body is containing two more divs, that means these two divs are going to be the children of your body, and the body is going to be the parent of your two divs, right? So let's understand this. That was just the theoretical part I was telling you. Now let's see the implementation. So first of all, let's have the universal selector. And before that, I just want to start with div. Okay, let me have a div. And let's have selectors as a heading. Okay, so use a style tag and just use a div. This div is going to have a light blue color. It doesn't matter, so let's open it with the live server. Okay, see, this is the selector, but what I want to do is, okay, let's give a padding of 20 pixels. Yeah, so I have a padding. Now see, in the previous lecture I told you something about the spacing, that this is default margin given by the browser, and it's not possible that I want to get this every time, right? I want to change my styling, or I want to set the default setting, right? So how I can do that? And this particular thing will be applied to whole of my document. How? Let's see. If I am going to have a paragraph of lorem, now you will see over here, and let me give it the same CSS to this. Now see, I have not given the spacing. This top and left margin is automatically applied by the browser, right? So but I don't want that. So usually what we use to set this universal selector, we use a asterisk for that, and we put margin as 0. Okay, so now it is going to have a 0 margin. Now I can give it a margin. I can override this particular thing and I can put it as 20 pixels. Now remember that I have given margin to both of them at once. If I have not given margin to this particular thing, I have given margin to only the top one. See, this is at the left. Now this is taking the space of margin 20 pixels, okay, from top, left, right and bottom. So this was your universal selector. Universal selector, whenever we use that, this particular properties, whichever is inside the universal selector, will get applied to whole of the document at once, and later on you can override it exactly like I did, right? So you can also do that. Even if you want to put a margin, a padding as 0, we usually do that. You need to put a comma over here, okay? And let's have a padding. So I did something. Wait, I want to do this, and now I can. You don't have to do comma, you have to give a semicolon. See, okay, we usually write this thing. So this was your universal selector. If you want to put some property which you want it to get applied to the whole of the document, you can use this particular thing. Now if I want to use a background color of blue violet, okay, so you will see that it will apply to your whole document, okay. So you can just remove this thing and it will get away, okay. So next is your, so far we have covered element selectors, okay, combinators. I will just show you combinators also. So this is your universal selector, okay. This was okay. Now let's move to something called class selector. Now let me have H1. Hi, we are covering the class. We are covering the selectors part in this lecture. Okay, I've just written something in H2. Okay, so this is my heading part. Now let's see, I have this particular thing and I want to have one more paragraph, and in the view you can always go with the word wrap. Okay, so see, whenever you have to use class selector, how you will do that? You will write over here a attribute called class, okay, and you can name anything you want as a value. What I mean is, I want to put a para 1 over here, okay, or I just want to see a para, okay. That para means, and why I have given a para, that means, so always try to give it some specific name which will specify that yes, this para is belong to something called paragraph, okay. So your name should be like this. So class is para. Now see, I have written this class, but I am not using it somewhere, so nothing is there. But to use that, for using a class selector, you always need to use one comma or one dot over here. Use dot, and dot followed by the name of the class, the value which you have given, right? So here you can add background color to be best, okay. So you will see that your class or your property of background color is working now, right? Why? Because you have name para over here, but to access the class selector you need to use a dot over here, okay. But this class selector you can use multiple times with the same name in a single document. What do I mean by that is, if you want to have the same property of background color to this particular paragraph also, then you can just copy this class and you can put it here. So now see, the same background color will be applied to this also. Now, if you want to give it a margin of 10, both will have the margin of 10 pixel. Write it with the pixel. Okay. See, the 10 pixel is applied to both of them. So, font size basically we use to increase the size of this particular text. Okay. So, if you will write font size, it will increase the size of the text by 20 pixel. So see, the font is going to be 20 pixel. Okay. So this property is applied to both. Now let's see, if you will change the name of this class, now the property will get removed because you have not given any of the properties or you have not specified any CSS for this particular class. Okay. So this was your class. So you can have the same class with the same name to multiple things. Now, if I want to have a class to this, I can also apply this. Remember, I have not given class to div, I have given to paragraph. So now this is the same property as applied to this particular thing also. So now I want to remove. Okay. But why I have used the class? Because it might happen that I want to implement the same properties to some other containers also. So I don't have to write it again and again. I don't have to write the multiple properties again and again. I can just give the same class name to that particular element. Okay. So with this thing, you will have the number of line reduced. Okay. So now let's move to ID selector. You have covered this class and now let's see. Now remember, you need to understand the class and ID selector because this is a very important topic of your CSS. Okay. So ID is always unique, as you know. So here also this is going to be same. So if you are using ID, it's with the same name cannot be used in the whole of the document. For example, let's see, I have some H2 over here, okay, and I am giving, let's see something about ID selectors. Okay, so now see, it's there, and let's have H4 as its bigger. So I want to select this particular H4, but what I want, I will use ID as my attribute and I'll give it a value as, let's suppose, heading 2. Okay, I've given it a name heading 2. Now how I will select my ID selector is with the help of this hash. Okay, this hash will be before the name of my ID. And what is the name of my ID? Heading 2. Remember that you should have the same spelling. Either you can just copy or paste. So just have this particular thing. I want to change it. Let's have this particular background to H2. Now see, this ID is working now. But as I said, you cannot have the same ID name in one document. Okay, but see, if you are copying this heading 2 and you are applying it to this paragraph over here, you will see that it is working, but you know that you cannot use the ID with the same name. You will have to use the different name. Let's suppose you can use heading 3, heading 4 or something else, but you cannot use this heading 2 now in the whole document. So I hope you have understand what is class, what is the ID, what are element selector, what are universal selector, and rest we will continue in the next lecture. Thank you so much everyone.